Hi, I'm Seán Duggan, and welcome to the iPhone Viewfinder. In this episode, I'm going to take you through the compositing process that I used on my iPhone to create this strange and surreal science fiction scene with just a hint of film noir styling. This image harkens back to that venerable science fiction classic, War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, a novel about a Martian invasion that was first published in 1898. For my composite, the source images are two photos shot from the window seat of two different airplanes. I'll start by using Diptych to make a mirrored version of one of the images to create the alien spacecraft. Next, I'll go into Image Blender and use layers, blend modes, and masking to blend that image with the airplane window shot. Finally, I'll take the finished composite into Snapseed for some final seasoning and unifying adjustments to tie everything together. The first part of creating this science fiction inspired composite is to create the initial mirrored or reflected image that will serve as the kind of strange and menacing alien spacecraft that is hovering out the window of the airliner. And to do that, I'm going to go into my compositing group and I'm going to choose the app Diptych. So Diptych is great for creating layouts of different pictures next to each other, as in a traditional diptych, or a triptych for that matter. I'm going to choose the third thumbnail in the classic view, which is just a square image with two panels on the left and the right. Now by default, Diptych comes up and shows you the images that you used last. So what I'm going to do first here is I'm going to get rid of the borders. So you can see that there are some white borders around the edge of the layout as well as cutting up in the center. So I'm going to tap on borders here, and you can see here that I can move this slider and change the size of my borders. I'm just going to move that all the way over to the left so I have no borders at all. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap to select one of the panels. Now I've just tapped on the one on the left. I can either tap on it again or just tap on this little picture icon, the little thumbnail here on the right side of the little toolbar. And that'll bring up the access to my camera roll. I'm going to click on all photos up here. And then that gives me access to my albums. That's not really clear when you are initially viewing that all photos view of thumbnails. And I'm going to go to an album that I have called In Progress. And that's where I move pictures that are components in some other project. So it's just easier for me to find them, and I don't need to worry about endlessly scrolling up through my camera roll to find a particular picture. So you can see here that there are already some previous versions of my Martian spacecraft here. I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to choose this one image of the airplane propeller. The strange kind of warped and bendy look to the propeller there comes from the rolling shutter effect, which is something that's particular to camera phones. If you're interested in what causes that, just look up rolling shutter effect on the web and you'll find lots of information about it. So I'm going to tap and drag on this image here just to bring it in a little bit. I want to see all of the edge of that one outer propeller blade there. And next, I'm going to double tap on the right-hand panel to bring up the image selector again. I'll choose the exact same image. And now that just needs to be flipped. So down here in the toolbar, I'll just tap on flip. And there I get a few choices for how I want to flip that image. I just want to reflect this from left to right, so I'll tap that first icon. And now I can drag this around and modify this so it blends together really well. So something like that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll bring it in a little bit closer, something like that. Okay, that's all I want to do with this. I'm going to tap the Publish button. And I typically choose the largest size here. And this is factoring in the image size of both of the images that it's using to create this diptych. Of course, it's actually using the same image, but it's using two different copies of it. And having the image at the largest size possible just gives me more flexibility in terms of what I want to do with it if I decide I really like it and I want to make a print or something like that. So I'll just choose large, and we'll save that out to the camera roll. And now that that is done, we'll close out here, and let me go to my Photos menu and go to the camera roll and choose that image. And I'm just going to tap the Edit button up in the upper right. And this is the onboard editing suite that is part of the iPhone Photos app. I'll tap on the Crop tool, and then I'll tap this Rotate button in the lower left to rotate the image. So there we go. That's how I want to have it, because I do want to have it kind of looking like this menacing spider or insect. I'm also going to tap on the adjustments icon, which is this little dial icon down here. And I'm going to go into black and white. And I'm just going to drag on this little film strip down below to choose different variations of the black and white treatment. I want to have it separated a good degree from its background, so I don't want the sky to be too dark. Something like that looks okay. I think I want to go in and maybe increase the contrast. So I'll tap on the little menu button here to open up the menus. I'll go into the light section, and I'll just drag back and forth a little bit to see how that might affect it. Open up the menu for the light section, and I want to choose contrast. And I do want to up the contrast a bit, because that's going to make the darks of the kind of the upper legs of our strange alien spacecraft look just a little bit darker and a little bit more dramatic. So I think that that's okay. I'll just choose Done, and I'll exit out of there. And now we're ready for the next step. The next step in our compositing process is to bring the two images together. The shot looking out the airplane window and the mirrored image that represents that bizarre alien spacecraft. So I'll tap on my Image Blender app. Now in Image Blender, as you can see here, the two little squares in the lower left represent the background and the foreground layer. So you need to give some thought as to what image is going to be the background and what image is going to be the foreground, because you really only have the ability to move an image around or scale it larger or smaller or apply a blend mode or apply a layer mask if you're working on the foreground image. Now you can switch those later on in the process, but I typically like to start out knowing that one of my layers is going to be the one that I'm going to be manipulating and moving and resizing, etc. So I'll tap on the square in the lower left to go get my background image, and I'll go into my In Progress album, and I'll get that airplane window shot. Now I've already converted this to black and white just using the basic tools included in the iPhone Photos editing app. And now I'll tap on the square in the lower right to go and grab the alien spacecraft. And we'll get that version right there. And initially when you bring two images together, it just sets the opacity for the top image at 50%. And that is what this little slider is here at the bottom. It's just an opacity slider. So I'm actually going to set that up to 100%. And I'm going to go into the Arrange mode, which is this icon at the top that looks like the Move tool in Photoshop. It's that little cross with little arrows on the tip. And now I can use my thumb and my forefinger to pinch the image smaller or spread it up a little bit larger. And I can get this in position here. I can drag it around, get it the way I want it, the way I think it's going to look good. So something like that looks pretty good. Let's make it maybe a bit smaller. Something like that looks pretty good. Maybe a bit bigger. Okay, that looks good. I'm just going to say Save. And now I'm going to apply a blend mode to see how much of the kind of compositing, blending effect can be handled by a blend mode, because oftentimes a blend mode can do a lot of the work. So I'll tap on the little blue layered icon in the center up there, those two blue squares, and I'll come in here and look at some blend modes. I like overlay a lot. That's really doing quite a lot for me. Another one that might work is soft light. Contrast is a little bit lacking there, but that could be a possibility. And then there's hard light. Hard light's a bit too contrasty overall, I think, especially on the outer edges of the picture. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to choose overlay. And then I'll just tap on the blue layered icon to get out of there. Next, I'm going to go into my masking mode, and that's the little pencil icon up at the top. Tap that to get into the mask mode. Now, if you look down at the bottom in the center of the masking interface, there's a little pencil, and the way that that pencil is pointing indicates whether you're going to be erasing the image or masking the top image or revealing it. So if the eraser is pointed downward, it means that you're going to be erasing, hiding, or masking out the top. And if you tap on the pencil, it'll flip, and then it points downward, which means you're going to be revealing it. I'm going to have mine set to erase for the moment. If I tap on the icon right next to it, you see that there are 4 different ways that you can apply the mask. Going from left to right, they are a circular hard edge brush, a circular soft edge brush, a radial gradient, and then finally a linear gradient. I'm going to actually start with the hard edge brush. I'm going to tap on the little gear icon in the lower left, which allows me to see the offset. And the offset is actually pretty interesting because this addresses the issue when you're working with touch apps, especially on a small screen like a phone, where sometimes your finger is covering up the area that you need to see. So with this offset here, I can change that. So the center circle represents where my finger would be, and the darker circle off to the side represents where all the painting action would be taking place. I'm actually going to set this to where it's just up above like that. And of course I can change the size of the brush here if I want. I'll just choose done. And now I'm just going to paint on here and totally erase the image of the creepy spacecraft. So it's totally gone there, all right? And then I'm going to switch the mask mode to reveal. So I'll tap on the pencil so that the pencil tip is pointing down. Tap on the mask mode again. I'm going to get the radial gradient, that third icon from the left. And now I'm going to position my finger, roughly where I think the center of that spaceship is going to be, somewhere up in the center of the sky there. And I will just put my finger there and drag out. It looks like I positioned that pretty good. And you can see how that is revealing this layer here. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to have to do a little bit of cleanup, but overall I kind of like the way that that is looking. I can always try to position my finger a little bit differently and try to get a better blend, but overall I kind of like the way that that's looking. All right. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here when you're working in an image blender in the mask mode is that it's always displaying the top layer with a little bit of a reduced opacity, just so you can see what's going on. So it will have a little bit more density to the blacks and a little bit more contrast once we exit out of this mode. So next what I need to do is just address the fact that there are some edges here that are still showing, some hard edges. So I'm going to get the linear gradient, and I'm going to change my pencil so that the eraser is pointing down. And I'm just going to drag up from the bottom to hide that bottom edge. So I'm putting my finger right where that edge is and just kind of dragging up. That's all I need to do there. And I'm going to do the same thing up in the upper left corner here. I'm going to drag in that way. And the same thing on the right side here to hide that hard edge of the image on the right. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to just tap save to see what that looks like. Overall, I think that looks good. I'm going to maybe lower the opacity just a bit. And I can always bump up the contrast a little bit later in another app. So overall, I think that looks good. I'm now going to save this out so I can work on it in another app. So I'll tap on the share or save button up in the upper right. And I'll choose to save that to my camera roll. Now, whenever you save out an image from Image Blender, it always asks you if you want to start over on a clean project. At this point, I always say no, because I want to leave the image open here in Image Blender with the layers intact, so that if I find that I have any modifications that need making, I can easily come back while the app is still open. If I choose to start over on a clean project, it's just going to get rid of this. So I'm going to choose no here just to leave that open. And now we are ready to move on to the next phase of this project. The next step in the process is to take this image into another app just to apply some unifying tonal and contrast changes to kind of bring it all together. So I'll tap on the home button just to get out to my main screen, and I'll go into one of my photography groups. I'll choose Snapseed as my app of choice. Choose to open a photo from the device, and I'll go into the camera roll and grab that most recently saved image that I created in Image Blender. So I'll tap on the pencil icon down here just to get into my editing choices. I'm going to go into Tune Image. If I drag up and down on the image, I get a menu of different parameters that I can adjust. I'm going to start with brightness. And if I drag left or right, I can change the value of that parameter. So I can decrease the brightness or increase it. I'm going to maybe bring it up just a little bit. Then I'm going to go and choose contrast. I'm going to bring contrast up a fair amount. And maybe I'll bring the shadows up as well, just a little bit. Up in the upper right corner is a little before and after button. If I tap on that, I can see the before view and then the after view. That looks okay for now. Next, what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of a blur. So I'll tap on the pencil icon again to get out to my editing choices. And I'll choose the lens blur filter. I'm going to leave it set here to a radial blur, but I'm going to drag up and down on the screen to get to my transition settings and then lower that transition. I'm also going to increase the blur strength. So my aim here with this setting, this blurring, is to slightly blur the window frame to put the spacecraft in the background in focus. And that way it will kind of increase the sense that, we are inside the plane looking out. So I'm going to adjust this a little bit. I'm using my thumb and my forefinger just to sort of pinch to adjust the size and the shape of this this blur radius. And if a little bit of that spacecraft is slightly out of focus, that's okay. So something like that looks pretty good. I'm going to maybe lower the blur down a bit. Tap the check mark in the lower right just to apply that. So I'll tap on the pencil icon again. Scroll down to look at my filters. I'm going to go into the noir filter. That has some interesting looks to it. If I tap on the little choices here, I've got a range of different choices I can choose. That one looks pretty cool. I definitely want to go, I think, more for a higher contrast view of the image here. So I'm just going to quickly tap through all of these to see which one I might like. I suspect it's going to be down towards the end. That one looks pretty interesting. Now in any of these, if I swipe in the center of the screen, I can get additional choices here to modify this. So if I like this but felt it was a little bit too bright, I could bring it down or drag it up. Actually, I think I'm going to go back in here and choose a different one. That one there is looking kind of good. Can increase the color wash, increase the grain if I want to really give that grainy look there. So I think that something like that is looking pretty good. And I'm just going to tap the check mark to say okay to that. And then finally, I'm going to tap the save button and export that. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that short tour through the compositing process for that particular image using 3 different apps. Actually, 4 different apps if you factor in the onboard editing tools in the iPhone Photos app. If you want to learn more about making photo composites on smartphones and tablets, I have a lynda.com course on that very subject. And you can find that by going to lynda.com/Seán Duggan. If you're interested in seeing more of my iPhone compositing work and my iPhone photography in general, check out my Instagram feed. You can find me there at sduggan. And you can also see more at my website, seanduggan.com. Thanks for watching.